What if I told you the government once let a deadly disease spread through an entire black community on purpose? What if I told you scientists injected children with radioactive material without their parents ever knowing? These aren't conspiracy theories from the internet. These are real, documented facts from American history. Facts that were hidden for decades. Today, we're going to uncover the dark truth about how the U.S. government and medical institutions used black Americans as human test subjects. These experiments happened in your grandparents' lifetime, and the effects are still felt today. In this video, we are going to cover 6 shocking cases that the government has done a very good job of keeping under wraps and out of the public's eyes. They don't want you to know this. From syphilis to lead paint, these stories will shock you to the core. But here's the thing. Once you know, you can't unknow. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why trust in the medical system didn't just break overnight. It was shattered deliberately over decades. So let's get into it. To understand these experiments, we need to go back in time. During slavery, black people's bodies were treated as property, not as human beings deserving of respect or care. Sadly, this mindset didn't disappear after slavery ended. Throughout the 1900s, many doctors and scientists saw black Americans as perfect test subjects. Why? Because they thought black people were different from white people, not just in skin color, but in every way. This racist thinking led to decades of horrific medical experiments. Here's something important to understand. Today, before any medical experiment, doctors must get something called informed consent. That means they have to tell you exactly what they're doing and get your permission first. But back then, this rule didn't exist. And even when it did, it was often ignored when it came to black patients. The stories I'm about to tell you help explain why many black Americans still don't trust doctors and hospitals today. Before we dive in, I need you to do something. If you're shocked by what you're about to learn, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that share button and tell others about this history. Also hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out. On our other videos, where we cover shocking black history uncovered. These stories were hidden for decades, and the only way to make sure they're never repeated is to make sure people know they happened. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Our first stop is Tuskegee, Alabama in 1932. The U.S. Public Health Service told 600 black men they were getting free health care for bad blood, a term used to describe various illnesses. But here's the truth. 399 of these men actually had syphilis, a serious disease. The doctors never told them they had syphilis. Instead, they wanted to watch what would happen if the disease went untreated. They wanted to study how syphilis would damage and eventually kill these men. This study lasted 40 years. In 1947, scientists discovered that penicillin could cure syphilis. Did they give it to the men in Tuskegee? No, they did not. Instead, they continued watching them suffer and die. The experiment only ended in 1972 when a whistleblower leaked the story to the press. By then, many men had died. Others had passed syphilis to their wives and children. Think about this. The U.S. government watched black men die from a curable disease for 4 decades. This wasn't an accident. It was planned. Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells. In 1951, a 31-year-old black mother named Henrietta Lacks went to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore with severe stomach pain. She had cervical cancer. During her treatment, doctors took some of her cancer cells without asking her or her family. This was common practice. Patients had no say in what happened to their tissue. But Henrietta's cells were special. Unlike normal cells that die quickly in labs, her cells kept growing and multiplying. Scientists named them HeLa cells, from the first 2 letters of her first and last name. These cells became incredibly valuable. They were used to develop the polio vaccine, cancer treatments, and thousands of other medical breakthroughs. Companies made billions of dollars from her cells. But Henrietta's family? They remained poor and couldn't afford health care. They didn't even know her cells were being used until the 1970s, 20 years after her death. For decades, They received nothing while others got rich from Henrietta's body. The St. Louis radiation experiments. In the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. Army had a problem. They wanted to know what would happen if enemies attacked American cities with chemical weapons, so they decided to run a test. The Army drove trucks through poor neighborhoods in St. Louis, areas where mostly black families lived. From these trucks and from rooftops, they sprayed a fine mist containing zinc cadmium sulfide, a radioactive substance. The residents had no idea they were breathing in radioactive material. Parents sent their children outside to play. People hung laundry on their porches. They lived their normal lives while being used as test subjects. The government claimed the substance was harmless, but internal documents tell a different story. These papers, which weren't released until the 1990s, show officials knew the material could be dangerous. Years later, many residents reported unusual cancers and health problems. Some believe the experiments caused these illnesses, but proving it decades later is nearly impossible. The Army chose these neighborhoods because they thought no one would care about poor black families. They were wrong. The Holmesburg Prison experiments. From 1951 to 1974, something terrible was happening at Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia. A dermatologist named Dr. Albert Kligman was using mostly black inmates as human test subjects. Dr. Kligman didn't see the prisoners as people deserving of respect. He once said the prison was like an acre of skin for him to experiment on. The inmates were poor and had no power to say no. What kinds of experiments? Prisoners were exposed to dioxins, the same deadly chemical found in Agent Orange, the weapon used in Vietnam. They were given experimental drugs. Chemicals were applied to their skin to see what would happen. Many inmates developed severe skin problems, scars, and other health issues. Some effects lasted for life. Here's something that might shock you. Dr. Kligman later became famous for creating Retin-A, a popular acne medication. He developed it using knowledge gained from these prison experiments. The inmates who suffered for his research never received any of the profits from his discoveries. Forced sterilizations and the Mississippi Appendectomy. In 1961, civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer went to the hospital in Mississippi to have a small tumor removed. When she woke up, she discovered doctors had done something else. They had sterilized her, making it impossible for her to have more children. This procedure became so common in the South that it got a nickname, the Mississippi Appendectomy. Doctors would tell black women they needed routine surgery, then secretly sterilize them. This wasn't just happening in Mississippi. States like North Carolina, Virginia, and others had official programs designed to prevent black women from having children. This was part of the eugenics movement, the false belief that some people shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. Between 1907 and 1963, over 65,000 Americans were forcibly sterilized. A large percentage were black women, poor women, or women with disabilities. You might think this ended in the 1960s, but you'd be wrong. Some of these sterilization programs continued into the 1980s. This means some of your parents or older siblings were alive when this was still happening. The Baltimore Lead Paint Experiments. Our final case brings us to the 1990s, not that long ago. In Baltimore, researchers from Johns Hopkins University knew that many homes in poor, mostly black neighborhoods contained dangerous lead paint. Instead of helping families remove the lead paint, the researchers decided to study what would happen to children living in these homes. They wanted to see how lead exposure would affect the kids' development and health. The families were told they were part of a study to help reduce lead exposure. But the researchers weren't actually trying to protect the children. They were using them to gather data about lead poisoning. When families discovered the truth, they sued. The researchers had allowed children to be poisoned for the sake of science. Courts eventually ordered large settlements for the affected families. Think about this. In the 1990s, when your parents were kids, American researchers were still using black children as test subjects. So why does all this matter today? These experiments didn't just hurt the people directly involved. They created a deep mistrust of medical care that continues today. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many Black Americans were hesitant to get vaccinated. Some people called this ignorant or selfish, but when you know this history, you understand why many Black families might be suspicious of medical authorities. Even today, Black Americans are underrepresented in medical research and clinical trials. This means new treatments aren't always tested on diverse populations, which can make them less effective for everyone. The good news is that these experiments led to important changes. In 1979, the government created the Belmont Report, which established strict rules for human research. Today, institutional review boards must approve all research involving humans. Informed consent is now required for all medical procedures and research. Patients must be told exactly what's happening and must agree in writing. More Black doctors, nurses, and researchers are working to rebuild trust and ensure ethical treatment. But here's the reality. Trust, once broken, takes generations to repair. The effects of these experiments are still felt in Black communities across America. For over a century, Black Americans were used as human test subjects by their own government and medical institutions. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a system that saw Black bodies as expendable. Understanding this history doesn't mean we should avoid all medical care. Instead, it means we should demand transparency, respect, and ethical treatment for all patients. If this history shocked you, share this video. These stories were buried for decades, and many people still don't know they happened. We're uncovering them one truth at a time. Subscribe to Black History Uncovered so we can continue exposing what they tried to hide. Because the truth matters, especially when it's been hidden for so long. Knowledge is power. Use it wisely.